It's like we have one life to live and you get X amount of time. We don't know how much time we have. And if you do the math on that, so as a tattoo artist, my shop rate is $200 an hour. It's really good money, and I work a lot. My wife's got me booked out till the end of next summer sometime, so it's a waiting list for sure. My life is worth so much more than $200 an hour, as is yours, as everybody's is, because if you actually do the math backwards and you go, okay, if I had 40 or 50 or 60 years, how much you make per day, let's say. You might be a few $1,000,000, but man, if you could buy one more day when it's your last, how much would that be worth? You know what I mean? Or one more year or 10 more years to do what you really love. And I find too many people don't get to do what they love. They get to do what they have to do and they forget about the thing they love. And maybe I'm a sucker for punishment, but I can't let myself go through this life not experiencing things that I love more than the things that it takes to make money to just pay a light bill or whatever, right? So
Hey there, go-getters! I'm Mike Ivashu, host of Busy Done Better, the podcast designed to help you embrace and enjoy your busy work life. A programmer since the age of 12, my journey has taken me from an employee to business owner and founder of booked-in online scheduling. But I'm not here to brag about my success or sell you my 10-step plan. The truth is, on many days, I still struggle to keep it all together. Wearing too many hats, having to lead when I don't feel like a leader, solving problems I know little about, struggling to be present with family when all I can do is think about work. Whether you're running a $10 million company, a small business, or working a demanding job, you're likely familiar with these challenges. On this podcast, we examine the dark side of business life, significance of mental health, dynamics of remote work, and the ever-changing meaning of work-life balance, and hopefully make your busy and hectic day a little more interesting and enjoyable. In today's episode, I have the pleasure of talking with Joel Lee, a tattoo artist, country music singer, guitar maker, painter, and devoted family man. Joel's passion for life and spiritual perspective is what keeps him going and keeps him very busy. Joel lives to pursue his passions, of which there are many. A self-taught man, constant thinker, and tinkerer, Joel has multiple music, artistic, and construction projects on the go at all times. All this while owning and operating a busy tattoo shop and spending time with his wife, 3 children, and 3 grandchildren. How does he do it? He treats his time as his most valuable currency rather than money. This simple yet powerful principle allows him to pursue his hobbies and spend time with the people he loves. So tune in and get to know the man behind the needle, his country music ambitions, his rock and roll history, and unique perspective on tattooing and life. Hey Joel, welcome to the Busy Done Better podcast. Thanks for taking the time to do this.
yeah.
I did a little bit of Googling about you, and the first thing I kind of want to ask is you got a lot of things going on. You're a country musician. You run a tattoo business. You've got two kids, 3 kids.
I have 3 kids. They're all adults now. I have
Okay.
3 grandkids. Yeah.
3 grandkids.
3
Oh wow.
grandkids. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you release your new single?
That's coming up December 1st. So December 1st, the song is called Sad Country Song, and that drops December 1st. Pretty excited about this one. You know what I mean? It's not the usual that I do. Usually it's quite upbeat. This is sort of a mid-tempo song, and
Okay.
it's really it's country, but it's more modern, that's for sure. Yeah.
Okay, I actually listened to some of your songs. They're it was a lot of fun. Like
Thank you.
you've been a musician for quite a while. I've read somewhere that you had a rock band with your sons
That's right. Yeah.
a
It was
while ago.
Braden Marshall, and my oldest son's name is Marshall. My youngest son's name is Braden. Marshall was my bass player, and Braden was my drummer. And we toured as a father and son trio. I was a singer, front man, and man, we played some killer stages with that band. I really miss that time in my life with those 2 boys. They both started. Braden was about 13 when we started that, and we toured for about 10 years. Got to record with guys like Mike Fraser and Jeff Dawson, and Brian Adams studio. Just incredible time.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
We did pretty well with the Braden Marshall thing, and then they wanted a bit of a break. Their whole teenage life was basically playing music with their dad, right? It was rock music, so kind of Foo Fighters and Incubus kind of a vibe going on there. But they wanted a break, so I wanted to do country music. My dad was a country singer, so I thought, you know what, I'm gonna go back to my roots a little bit and play country music. And now my son, who's the drummer, Braden, he's still my drummer to this day, so we still play together. which is amazing. I wish my other son would still play because he's such a great player, but he's got a son of his own now and a daughter now too. So his life is busy. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's always tomorrow, right? Like you
that's
never
right.
know.
Yeah, yeah.
So what did you do during that time? So you were touring with your
Yeah,
sons?
yeah.
Was that your main source of income, or were you also doing tattoo already at that time?
No,
Or
I've been in construction for most of my life. So my
oh,
dad was a
okay.
jack of all trades. So with that comes the ability to do a lot of different things. So I've been everything from a sign maker, fiberglass or welder, fabricator to siding guy and window installations. I started my own commercial construction company 20 years ago, I guess. And my sons, as when they were young, they worked for me as well. So I was able to teach them, the trades as well.
Yeah.
The whole time while we're doing that, we were still rehearsing. We used to rehearse 4 days a week, 4 hours per rehearsal. And then we would be weekends from here to Regina to I was in Halifax, all over the country, So it was like I would work to have time. A lot of people work for money. I work for time. So for me, my passions mean more to me than money. I've just been able to make some money with my passions, which has been fabulous. So I can keep doing it. So, but yeah, no, we worked construction that whole time as well. The tattoo thing came online about almost 10 years ago now you know that was kind of a mistake. I've been an artist my whole life. I was a painter in my youth, and then in my 20s I was selling art in galleries. But then I had kids and I went, can I support a family on painting, you know what I mean, or the kind of life that I wanted to give, right? So that's when I really got into construction things. So because that's real money right now, and did that, raised my family on that for 20 years or so or more. And then and like I said, the tattoo thing just fell into my lap. My nephew wanted to be a tattoo artist and he needed some help with the art. So I started helping him and bought a tattoo machine. And honestly, my kids were of age at this point, but I started tattooing them and my wife, my friends and stuff like that. It took about a month. And I went from not tattooing really anybody to tattooing and booking further and further out. But the band really helped because I had a lot of followers with the band. I was
Right.
tattooing, I had this
Yeah.
huge client base to start. So it went really, really fast for me, which is a great thing about Booked In because when you get real busy, you need to take care of your stuff. And
Yeah.
a bit of a shameless plug for Booked In, but it works great. It's great software. Everybody we use loves it. They love the reminders, all that stuff. So there you go.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we work really hard to keep it simple. I mean, there's a lot of competitors. They do a lot of things. When I look at competitors there, I myself, knowing the industry very well, just struggled to figure out how to use half of these tools. So,
Yeah.
I want to go back to something you said just a few minutes ago about working for time. You work for time, not for money generally.
Yes.
So that's really interesting. Can you just kind of elaborate on that? Why is that your approach?
Um, I feel like we have one life to live, and honestly, it's a little bit spiritual, I guess. I believe God gave me talent, so it's not an egotistical thing to say or at all meant to be that way, but there's not much that I can't do. I always believe that if I put my hand to it and some hard work, I can do it. But when you have that mindset, the world becomes your oyster and you start to get interest in all kinds of things. So your time goes away. And especially with raising a young family and working, I worked because you need to. Everybody needs to work if you want to eat, kind of thing, right? But what makes me really happy is painting, carving, building it. I build guitars. I've built guitars. Some of them are all around the world. So there's many things that I love to do, but it takes time, and I never have the
Mhm.
time to do those things that I'm passionate about. So when I work, especially in construction, I would do a big commercial project. I was work on that job for 6 to 8 months, and I wasn't working for the big paycheck. I mean, obviously I was because you had to pay the bills. But for me, it was about okay. Once I finished that 6 or 8 month long project, I literally took 2 months off so I could build guitars, record music, write songs, and all these things to my wife's dismay. I mean, I have the most supportive wife. She's incredible. Her name is Peace, and she's an incredible woman, but she understands about me. So she doesn't try to take that out of my life. She understands, okay, well, work your ass off, part of my French. And if you have the time and the finances are in place, do whatever you want. And so that's what I would do. So literally, I would work for the 6 to 8 months, say, okay, I've got a 2 month window or a month and a half or even a month. And I would just write. If that was what I was into at that moment, I'd write and record. Or if I was building guitars, I would spend 2 weeks in my shop and she would literally just about slip food under the door because I'd be in there all day, all night, and built some nice guitars. I think there's one right here. Actually, I don't know if you can see this guitar here. I
Oh,
made that
the
years and years
acoustic?
ago.
Wow. I actually play guitar myself.
Dude, yeah,
Yeah, I'm a bit of an amateur, but yeah, I picked it up when I was 16 and just kind of
Yeah.
campfire type of
Yeah.
guitar. Never really got into bands. I
Yeah.
had a lot of friends in bands, but
Yeah.
it's probably one of, if not the most relaxing is the easiest word I can use.
Yeah.
Just an instant release.
Yeah,
I
for sure.
sit down, I play guitar, like everything just leaves.
It
Like all
melts away.
stress, everything
Yeah.
just leaves.
Yeah.
Now my daughter is actually, her main passion is musical theater, but she's also been playing piano for quite a
Wow.
while, and she's a singer, so she loves singing. So now, well, we don't do it often enough, but we'll sometimes we'll get together and just kind of jam out on a
Down a
song.
little
And
bit. Yeah.
yeah, I played a little bit of sports too growing up, and never anything serious, is just very amateur, but just having enough. I also like to do a little bit of a lot of different things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I can relate to the buying time thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, the business has been more about my passion, and I've had sort of businesses before that too. But yeah, it's about buying time,
Hmm.
and now that I get to share these things with my kids, I kind of realized that that's kind of what it was all about in the beginning. Anyway,
Sure
it's
it
just
is.
learning all these things so that you can then either pass on or share them with your
Yeah.
kids
Yeah.
and others. Like, as a way to just
100%.
communicate.
Yeah, I think that is, in a nutshell, because I tend to, I'm a rambler too. So when I talk, especially in interviews and stuff like that, I tend to say way more than I probably need to. But I guess the whole nutshell, the whole thing is like we have one life to live, and you get X amount of time. We don't know how much time we have, and if you do the math on that, so as a tattoo artist, my shop rate is $200 an hour. It's really good money, and I work a lot. My wife's got me booked out till the end of next summer sometime, so it's a waiting list for sure. My life is worth so much more than $200 an hour, as is yours, as everybody's is, because if you actually do the math backwards and go, okay, if I had 40 or 50 or 60 years, how much you make per day, let's say, you might be a few $1 million, but man, if you could buy one more day when it's your last, how much would that be worth? You know what I mean? Or one more year or 10 more years to do what you really love. And I find
Mm.
too many people don't get to do what they love. They get to do what they have to do, and they forget about the thing they love. And maybe I'm a sucker for punishment, but I can't let myself go through this life not experiencing things that I love more than the things that it takes to make money to just pay a light bill or whatever, right? So I think that's why the tools that we have in our lives to make things more profitable are so important, because like our lives are valuable. So if we have something, again, and I'll find these little ways of doing this, but and not just a plug booked in, but if there's ways to make things more organized and make your life more streamlined, 10 o'clock at night where we can't spend time together, like that time with her
Mm.
is the most invaluable thing to me. You know what I mean? So I don't want her spent chasing emails and, you know what I mean, all this kind of. It's nice to have her just have it done quickly, and then, hey babe, we can watch our favorite show, Yellowstone, or whatever it might be, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, you mentioned your wife's been incredibly supportive.
Mhm.
I'm very lucky in that same aspect, and there's a portion of which understanding each other, right? That's
Mhm.
like pretty huge. When the kids were young, there's that kind of, you got to just straight up provide, your passions. You still keep them as much you can, but it's more about, you
Mhm.
because you like to do a lot of different things, right? And so did you and your wife have an understanding about, okay, as long as these things are met,
Yeah.
you can pursue your passions type of thing? Like, was it a very clear understanding between the two, and how did you sort of navigate?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the best way to answer that, my wife will follow me anywhere, kind of thing, right? And I think it's a bit more of an old fashioned, and I hate to use old fashioned too, because people can, they'll equate that with some old school man's the man, and that's not it at all.
Mhm.
We understand each, like you said, we understand each other to a point where she understands who I am, where she doesn't want to rob me. She's the most giving, loving person you'll ever meet. She really is very
Mm.
selfless. So, for example, if there's two cookies left on the tray, for example, she'll prefer that I have them both because she knows how much I love cookies, rather than having one for herself. You know what I mean? She's that selfless. So when it comes to what we're talking about now, it's like she just wants me to have my best life, and if I'm happy, she's happy. So, which also flips it onto my head, because if that's the way she's for me, I have to try and find a way to be the same for her. You know what I mean? So it's really this
Mhm.
relationship where she understands me and I understand her as well. So she makes the sacrifices, and so I try to make the sacrifice for her as well. And, to be completely honest, I don't always do a really good job of it, because I get so caught up um, in the things that I want, need, and want to do. So, for example, I mean, recording music is not an inexpensive thing to do. I mean, I work my butt off so I can afford to do these things, but I know she would love to sit on the beach in Mexico more. You know what I mean? Like maybe twice a year, she would love to go do that. but I don't afford her to do that, because of the expenses that go into recording and the different things that I do a lot of. But she also is able, she finds her ways. Okay, well, I'm not sitting on a beach in Mexico, so what she'll do is she'll find something that she likes to do around here, for example. So
Mhm.
she gives a lot. She sacrifices a heck of a lot, which is why I really like to see this song or songs that are released become hits. I had one, This Party Ain't Over, did really well in Canada, and the royalties start to
I
come in.
listened to that song. It was great.
Thanks,
Loved
man.
it.
Well, the royalties
Yeah.
did really, really well on that. So it paid for a lot of the recordings from not just that song, but in the past, the videos, all that stuff. So she was like, oh, there's a real feasibility to the music thing, right? So it's just team. You know what I mean? She doesn't want to hold me back. I don't want to hold her back. In fact, she's an RN. And so when she was going through school, it was a lot of work. I mean, but it was supporting her because I want her, if I wasn't here, I wanted her to have something that sort of shaped her life and what she really liked. And she's a very compassionate person, so she fits the RN thing, registered nurse thing, like a T. So, but I wanted her to have something that was peace. Do you know what I mean? That's her identity in the sense of this is what she's contributed in her lifetime, and she loves it. So we found the balance. There's been times where it's not been easy, where there is this like, oh, you need to go to work. I'm like, playing on a guitar neck, yeah, babe, you know what I mean? And there's been times where there hasn't been a lot of money, but I think there's a great way to say it is there's been times where we've polyed in our living room. The wife and I and the three kids would pile in there in the winter months a couple of times, where we didn't have money for to heat the whole house and all that kind of stuff. But we lived in the living room together for a month during the coldest spell, had the time of our lives.
Wow.
But I would never get, and we both talk about, we would never give it back because you got these little kids crawling over you. You're watching movies. I mean, it was the most incredible thing ever. But that's when you don't have that huge finance there. I think sometimes finance can rob us of the things that really are important. And it was beautiful, right? So there was those lows, and then there was times where we took our whole family to Hawaii and maxed the credit cards, and everybody had boogie boards and stayed in the
Yeah.
nicest hotel, and you know what I mean. So there's the peaks and the valleys, but the peaks feel so much better when there's valleys, right? So I think our lives have just evolved into this rhythm of now it's time to work and now it's time to play. You know what I mean? So we just
Yeah.
don't always work. So
Yeah. Well, what was your saying? The peaks are only good when there's valleys.
that's for
I think
sure. Right? Yeah,
that's a great way to put it.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think that's a great reminder when you are in a valley, right? That
Mhm.
nothing lasts forever, right? So
That's
if you're kind of in a struggle phase or whatever, it won't last forever. And also if you're kind of riding high, that won't
right.
last forever either, right?
That's
So
right.
it's just a constant roller coaster ride or whatever. And but yeah, like you said, uh, when you're in a valley, to remember that, well, this won't last forever, but
That's
it
right.
also to appreciate it, because if you don't appreciate the valleys,
Yeah,
then you won't appreciate the peaks,
that's right.
right? Because
Yeah.
then they just become, if you all you had is kind of like, kind of
Oh,
a
it would
not
get
much
boring
up
after
and
that.
down, it would just, yeah, you have it like, and you see it, right? You see
Yeah,
people that have everything and they're miserable. They just get everything given to them whenever they need to, and I mean, I don't know, I can't relate. I just assume
yeah,
that,
yeah.
and I hear that. I've
I've
never
met a lot of wealthy
had that.
people, and it's funny how many people I've met, and some of them are very, very wealthy, and especially musicians and stuff like that as well, and producers who've had this life of Riley. You know what I mean? And when as we're talking, and I would talk with some producers and stuff like that, they would be asking about my family all the time and what it must be, how blessed I am, because they're seeing something that they don't have, right? And even I have people that I know close to me, they have a lot, but you can see there's something really missing. They don't have something there that I absolutely have. I'm a very, 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 very rich man. Like there's no doubt I'm extremely wealthy. It's not piles of gold. It's gemstones in my kids. It's diamonds like my wife. I'm my mother now lives with us, and she is an amazing woman. Has lived a long life and had a very hard life. Lots of valleys and peaks as well. But we have her here with us now, and it was a valley that brought her to us. But now that she's here, we're kind of ascending this peak together because we're starting to realize how enjoyable it is to have our company. Not just because she's my mom, but because there's this synergy that's happening between my wife and my mother and myself, and a lot of laughing and a lot of goofing off and stuff like that. So there's one of those things where life takes a loved one away, but
Laughing at your expense.
yeah, pretty much most of the time. Yeah, but yeah, she's pretty funny too, man. I'm trying to. We take some videos of her I want to use for promoting my music, but she won't let me yet. So I'm still trying to work on it because she's funny, man. Oh, yeah.
That's awesome. You seem like a very grateful person.
Thank you.
Is that, would you say that's born out of you're pretty religious person, or?
I was born in a very Christian family at a young age.
Okay.
Also, a young age, of course, born there. So my mom and dad were ministers, missionaries. They would travel.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I spent my time in the church as well. I am very grateful because I feel like a lot of what's been given to me, there's a real connection to some people, higher power, whatever I call him, God. I am a Christian man. I'm just not a religious man. One thing that I cannot handle is the entrapment of things that are meant to be free. Do you know what I mean? And I think a lot of times we put rules and regulations on things that are meant to be very organic. And I think that the world has lost that. And I think Christianity's lost it. If we're talking about that, where people don't really want anything to associate with it anymore because it's just so rigid and stifling. And for me, it's not about that. For me, it's family. It really is literally how I live with my family. My kids come over, we laugh, we goof off, we play, but we love one another. And I think that in a nutshell for me is religion. And I think if we can do that, we're all better off for it. So yeah, born into that kind of an atmosphere. My dad, like I said, was a musician. So we always had the sing songs and the home groups at our houses, and in fact, that's where I learned to play guitar. Is with my dad. He would play gospel music, and then my mom would preach. In our living rooms, everywhere we
Wow.
lived in Canada, which is incredible. Yeah, and it went from there to me kind of losing my way a little bit as a teenager. Late teens, I love my parents very much. So I always tried to serve them as best I could. But then, you get into party mode and this and that. And so the guitar went away and all that kind of stuff. But then I picked it up again, and having had what my dad had shown me, never put it down again, and been playing for 30 years since, you know what I mean? So started in religion or Christianity, I guess you could call it. And it still shows itself in my music a little bit. Like you was talking about the grateful thing. How could you not be grateful? I mean, all my family is healthy. My grandkids are healthy. I have a beautiful wife who loves me and puts up with me. I mean, that in itself is a grace. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. A lot to be thankful for sure. Way more to be thankful for than complacent about. You know what I mean? Complaining doesn't get you anywhere anyway. You just got to work. Work hard, put one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, that's something my wife taught me about the sort of X begets X, I guess is the way I put it. But, you know, positivity, for lack of a better word, or gratefulness begets more gratefulness.
Sure.
Negativity, complaining begets more complaining, type of
Yeah.
thing. So, but at the beginning, it's a choice,
Hmm.
right? So you can choose what words come out of your mouth. You can choose what your hands do in a particular scenario, or
Yeah.
where you want your feet to walk, right? Like there's always a
Yeah.
choice. So,
100%.
and once you to understand that when you make a choice to do whatever, that will sort of, neuroplasticity and all that, it just your brain's always, I think, trying to rewire itself to make your life easier, right? Like
Sure.
it's,
Sure.
you don't want to be in a state of struggle or distress or cognitive dissonance, in
Hmm.
terms of, like, nobody wants to be in that state for long. So it's always, so if you do positive things, your brain will just kind of rewire to make that easier, and it just kind of,
Absolutely.
your life just becomes that, and it becomes easier, right?
Yeah.
And same thing with negative. Like if you complain a lot, your brain just kind of rewires itself to kind of
Yeah.
make that natural and easy.
Yeah.
So it becomes easier and easier to complain.
Well, you see perpetually grumpy people, and it's because
Yeah.
that thing they've just said so
And then it
habitually.
defines your social circles too, right?
It
So now
does.
you
Yeah.
have other people that are attracted to that, and
Yeah.
they, so then you play off each other, and it becomes like almost a positive reinforcement of the complaining,
Totally.
and kind of,
Yeah.
and what, and I trying to learn to not judge,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
draw or judge less and less. So to each their own, I think.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
negativity has positive value, actually,
Sure.
in many scenarios. But yeah, it's just the understanding that our brains will just wire themselves to what you
Yeah. And like you said, birds of
behaviors.
a feather, they tend to fly together, right? And so you'll have that. And I think what right now we have this is an interesting dynamic too, because with those happy people, grumpy people with grumpy people, happy people with happy people, but we tend to, I think society is like this whole cancel culture thing where,
Mm,
oh, he's a grumpy person, put him over there because we're all
yeah.
happy people. Who
Slap a
knows who
label
this?
on them and get them out of my
Yeah,
sight,
yeah.
type of thing.
Instead of finding ways to accept people for where they're at, but constantly trying to continue to try and uplift them out of that place. You know what I mean? Because it takes a lot of work to take somebody who's sick and make them better. It's not for the faint of heart. You know what I mean? I think that's where the work ethic comes in for in all kinds of aspects of our lives. Is like it's not going to be easy being around a grumpy person all the time, but hopefully with enough jokes, you know what I mean, and work, you can make somebody less miserable and maybe even get to know them enough to find out what's making them miserable in the first place and try to change those patterns, like you said, right? So I think
Yeah.
if we just have a bit more time for one another instead of just going, we'll just put that person over there, we can all do a lot of good that way. In fact, it's funny, the tattoo thing, is the most incredible scenario, because when somebody's in your chair, they're in pain, they talk and they talk about the most intimate things, right? And I have the
Really?
there. Oh,
Wow.
it's an incredible
That's interesting.
opportunity to really talk to people, and I have these it's therapy sessions. Sometimes it's my therapeutic session. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But most times I find myself being able to offer whatever little wisdom I can muster up, or some what's the word, compassion, or try to find a way out for people while we're talking, and they talk about all kinds of stuff. And on top of it, like one of my favorite tattoos to do is memorial pieces, and they're for people that have lost loved ones, and for me, I get to
Mm.
sit there. It's such an honor because they're getting something done for somebody that they love very dearly, who's now gone. And sometimes a week ago, if I find out somebody wants a memorial piece and their parents or whatever died a week ago, I clear my schedule for that person because it's an opportunity to try and offer some kind of healing. And I've had a young man came in, he lost his dad, and him and his dad were so close. This young man was 19, and so he came in and we did this tattoo for him, and I designed it up for him, and I did it for him. But the kid was so polite, so respectful, and I was just like, it blew my mind. I was like, wow. I said, man, your dad did a fantastic job on you. You are one heck of a stand-up young man. The kid started to cry, and I was like, oh my god. So and I'm not a crier, but I had a couple tears as well. But I realized
Uh,
just the blessing it is for me to be able to do that for that person. And you
yeah.
could see the hurt he came in with and the sort of a different countenance he left with. It was incredible. And that happens
Huh.
quite often in my shop. Yeah.
Never considered that. It makes total sense that, yeah,
Yeah.
like it's probably, I imagine, yeah, I guess tattoos, a lot of people like what they tattoo themselves with is very meaningful to them, right? So it's
The
a
most
very,
personal thing to them. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, huh.
Yeah. There's a
That's
lot of tattoo artists that miss that opportunity. I think I mean, not all. I know some fabulous artists that are very sensitive for that as well. But there's a lot who'd rather talk about hockey, or which is not bad, or
mm,
darker things, or listen to heavy metal, and that's all great too. But I like the opportunity just to talk and know people. That's pretty fun. I will forget their names in an instant because I have a terrible memory for that. But but I'll know the stories, right? And it's great. I love it. Yeah.
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 They're there for quite a while, right? Like on average, like I don't know, like a medium sized like probably larger ones take days, multiple trips, I
Yeah.
imagine, to
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
finish. But like, I don't know, an average one maybe like a shoulder or something like
Yeah,
something
like
here.
something about a 6 inch
How
round. It's 3 hours usually.
3 hours? Yeah. So
Yeah.
I wonder if we live such busy lives and everybody lives such busy lives that's probably one of the very rare times where they just sit for 3 hours
Yeah.
and do
Yeah.
nothing, right? So
Yeah.
because I meditate and I do mindfulness things and stuff like that just because as life got really busy, I had to sort of put an effort in, uh, use tools to just kind of bring my brain back to kind of a calm state and at least practice that regularly because I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
felt like
Yeah.
if I didn't, I would lose it and forget that that's even possible.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I kind of relate it to physical exercise. I think if you have been out of shape for a very long time, you've completely forgotten the feeling of
Mhm.
being in shape, of that feeling of having energy and being like,
Yeah. Yeah.
springy,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think you've just forgot to the point where like you almost kind of don't think it's possible like that,
Yeah.
like it's such a
Yeah. Yeah.
foreign idea. And I think it's the same with the brain. Like I think if you've been super like just running, you wake up in the morning, you're on your phone, and that goes for so long, I think you just forget that feeling of calmness and how much joy. And for me, it's just pure happiness. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
when I go for a mindful walk sometimes or something, like just listening to the birds,
Yeah.
feeling like
Yeah.
there's a sense of connectiveness that you just forget because you're just all you're doing is running and you're in your head and you're thinking
Yeah.
about this, you're doing this, but thinking about three other things. And for me anyway, I find it just, I go through periods of just kind of feeling,
Oh,
yeah, just burnt out, I guess, or
yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And then you kind of do that and you realize it's just that child thing, right? Like you look at a child and they're just walking and all of a sudden they see a flower or a branch or a stick and they just
Yeah.
find it amazing. Like, oh, wow. And then you'll
Yeah.
stop there and take like a half an hour to, look at this or examine it or whatever.
Yeah.
And you realize like as an adult, you can still do that. You just
Sure.
forget. You just
Hmm.
forget, right?
Hmm.
And I imagine you get some of that with, or a lot of that in when you really deep dive into the stuff that you do, right? Where you just what
Yeah.
they call it the flow state, right? You
Yeah.
you just get into that flow state where like
Yeah.
time ceases to exist. Like you're just
Does. Yeah. Hours will go by, hours and hours will go by, and you won't even realize. Like even writing music or recording and stuff. Like I could spend 12 hours and not even and it'll be dark out and I'll go, oh crap, when did it get dark? I can't even, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like it literally
yeah,
happens to me. Or I'll be in this weird state for 8 hours and it was light out when I started. Now it's complete, and kids have come and gone. They're, from home from school. I'm like, what? In this complete warp of time, you know what I mean? But I love that, I really do.
yeah,
And I think again, just having those flows, but like you said, getting out of that, because I'm a thinker too. Like my mind never shuts off. I think the only time it shuts off is when I'm sleeping, and even then it drives my wife crazy. I'll even just start to fall asleep and I'll get a song idea. Well, it's so good. I'm like, because you're right in that middle place. I'm like, oh man, it's so good, but I'm so tired. I should just. And I was like, no, I'll grab my phone, try to stay in that place, and try and record try and get the melody or a couple of words out, or whatever, and then I can sleep. But it's funny, and when I'm awake, my wife will talk to me and it drives her nuts too. She'll say, are you listening to me? And I'm just trying to catch a word here and there because I know my mind's already left somewhere else. I'm thinking of some
yeah,
grandiose idea, how to save the world or a new, invention or whatever. Right. But she, again, she knows me. She's like, she says, have a notebook and write all this stuff down because you'll forget it anyway. And you're spending all this time thinking about it for what purpose, unless you write it down or track it. Right. So, yeah, I don't know. I could probably do what you do. I could probably meditate a bit more and clear some of the refragment my brain a little.
yeah. Well, you probably do. I mean, I think a lot of the work you do is kind of made it meditative in
Yeah,
nature.
that's
So
fair.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
there's like that's just a formal way to, but
Hmm.
yeah, there's a lot
Yeah.
of
But
ways.
when I have people in my chair too, one of the cool things about that and why I think it's so meditative is because it doesn't feel good. And so I get people to breathe. I give them breathing exercises. So there's
Mm,
6 seconds in, 6 seconds out. And so the entire time they're just managing their breathing, managing their pain, but they've got nowhere else to be. And their brain is really just working on being still, slowing their heart rate down. So it literally is. And my sessions, I do 2 a day, and they're both on average 4 hours per session. So I do a 4 hour 10 to 2, have an hour off, then I go 3 to 6 or 7 o'clock, right? So that usually happens every day. It's been like that for about 8 years now. But that's quite a long time to spend with people. So even my brain, focus wise, it gets sore. Like it's a lot of focusing for
yeah,
that long, right?
yeah,
But I do pieces that are, yeah, I book people in for 12 sessions. It's like, okay, well, we're doing an entire sleeve, another sleeve, and a back piece. And so most of the stuff that I do is quite large. I used to do a lot of smaller stuff, but now it's everybody wants a sleeve or a leg sleeve. It's like, it's a lot, man. Yeah. I'm actually
yeah,
looking forward to stepping back just a little bit, doing a little bit less. I want to do one 4 hour session a day and I'm good. You know what I mean? And then have
yeah.
my day to do other stuff.
I imagine, yeah, it'd be pretty exhausting to, yeah, have to focus. And I mean, you kind of don't want to screw up a person's body, right?
No, and you're
So,
literally putting ink. The funny thing about when I was a painter and sitting on canvas, and I love painting on canvas. I'm gonna be painting some more once I have more time, but that's on the surface, right? So you're painting the surface. With tattooing, you're painting subsurface. You're suspending the ink a millimeter in the skin, which is about the thickness of a dime. It's got to sit exactly there. And then you're also tattooing for not what you see when you're tattooing it, for what it's going to heal out a month later. So you're trying to think of what's that going to look like in a month from now once the skin does its thing, and then the suspension of where it's got to lay in the skin. It's the most challenging thing
hmm,
anybody can pretty much ever do. It's like, yeah, watch this. I can paint on canvas. Like, yeah, watch this. I can paint under the skin. I mean, it's pretty wild.
yeah,
Yeah, it takes
yeah,
years to
wow.
get. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But
I
it's
imagine.
a fun thing if you can do it well. Yeah.
And so was it mostly self-taught for you, or did you have a mentor?
It started out kind of self-taught. That was one of the things, like I said, with my dad teaching me so much at a young age, and always being with machinery and tools. I mean, I was running routers and table saws at 10 years old. You know what I mean? My dad would say I would cut and trim plexiglass and flame polish, all that kind of stuff. So when you have that upbringing around machinery and equipment, you understand how tools are supposed to work. And I remember my dad always said to me, "Don't force a machine to do what it's supposed to do. It's designed to just, like a palm sander, for example. A lot of people lean on that thing and it doesn't do any good at all. But if you just have the way the machine is the pressure on there, let the machine do the work." So when you have that understanding of machines, same with tattooing, you start to understand how the machine's supposed to work. Okay, it's supposed to do this. This is what it's supposed to do. And you start to feel it and you start to look for signs of how it's supposed to be working, like the way it feels when it kind of pricks in like an apple with a toothpick, and then the vibration, the sounds, all that kind of stuff. So I did that and I started getting really good results initially. So self-taught initially. And then I worked in Hawaii, and my family was in Hawaii for quite a while. And I worked in a shop in Hawaii for a bit and just had a mentor, John Butler, killer tattoo guy, and really nice family man as well. Anyway, I tattooed with him for a while when my dad was sick. So we stayed over there for 6 months, and I was working in his shop for about 6 months. Hey, man. And I'd watch him, you know what I mean? And just see what he was
Mhm.
doing. And then he would come and give me a couple of pointers, and it really helped me tremendously. But I'd already been tattooing for about a year at that point. So it was really just
Okay.
sharpening up on things, which was really
Mhm.
helpful at the time. And then came back to Canada, and it's just ramped up. But so now I have two apprentices that I'm teaching. Um, and it's been a really easy process for them in some ways because they haven't had to learn from all the mistakes maybe, or the lack of knowledge that I had initially, right? So it went fast for me though. I think being self-taught for some people is maybe not the way to go, but for a guy like myself, you know what I mean? I tattoo myself first. I wanted to get the basics down on myself, so my legs, wherever I could fit. And I found, hey, you know what? This is actually some of my first tattoos. Honestly, Mike, were huge side pieces. I mean, I might have been 6 months into the trade, and these side pieces held up, and and I'm not bragging. I'm just saying I'm quite amazed at how I could just figure
Mm.
that thing out. I mean,
Yeah.
but that's having balls, like, or courage, I should say. Sorry, is just from head to toe. Like, oh, I can do that. There's nothing I can't do, and do it. You know what I mean? You
Do
know?
you do you find that starts, I imagine, I mean, part of it's probably genetic. You just have that brain of super curious, right? Like you're
Yeah.
super curious. You're always like, oh, I wonder how that works.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but I just by your description, I'm guessing that the way you grew up, you were given sort of trust, like, or
Yeah.
the space to pursue your curiosity, like whether it be here, use this belt sander to do this or
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
by your dad or your parents. So how much of that do you think impacted you in terms of your ability to pursue your curiosities, just the way you grew up?
I think that's a really great question. In fact, when you just said that now, I was thinking when I was a kid, my parents were quite they had a lot of faith that we'd be okay, I think. You know what I mean? Again, from their Christian roots and their basis in God to having faith. But I remember this time we'd hang off cliffs on ropes, and my kids would go, "Oh, that's kind of cool. They think they're, rock climbers and stuff like that." But I mean, we're like 8, 10 years. I mean, at that time, you know what I mean? But we were less, I think, in those days, in the 70s and 80s, let's say, parents were a little more okay to let their kids explore and chance an injury, whereas today parents are like, oh no, and they will bubble wrap their kids.
Mhm,
So I think
mhm,
a great example would be, what 10-year-old's got a chainsaw? I mean, that's not, who would give a 10-year-old a chainsaw? But I remember having my first chainsaw, was a little McCullough 50, and cutting fire with my dad, in the bush at 10 years old, or like him showing me how to run up like a joiner, you know what I mean? Planing the edge of plexiglass, at 8, 9 years old. And then, by the time I was 10 or 11, I was like, Dad, we were making menu holders out of plexiglass, and I had a stack of stuff to do. And my parents went out to visit some friends or something like that. I said, do you want me to just finish cutting those pieces? Like, oh yeah, sure. I mean, I would never leave my kid that age with a table saw. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? But you know what I mean? But that was the ability for them to understand. And I also think that they could see the skill that they already shown, they could see in a kid, you know what I mean? And I don't know that I would still, even to this day, I don't know if I would give a 12-year-old a table saw or whatever. But I think there's a real dynamic there where today sometimes this pendulum swung so far where our kids are wearing helmets and bubble wrap, and
Yeah.
just like they're soft. And not all kids. I know
Mhm.
a lot of kids that are like, well, your dad raised you well, you can tell. But there's others who are like, the species is in trouble.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
but my own sons too, and I did with my own sons too, is really taught them. I still am very paranoid for them. I want them to be safe. So I kind of maybe a little bit more overbearing than what my dad was with me. But because I want them safe, but I've taught them well, and it was hard on my kids too. You know what I mean? They said they were going to be somewhere. I said, you got to be there. You know what I mean? Unless you forget completely like I did with you.
So this grace, yeah. But yeah, I think
we can do better, I think, for some people to let kids make mistakes in the first place, but then
Yeah.
hold accountable. You know what I mean? So everything's a lesson, I feel like, in life. But that's a great point, though. Being younger, letting your kids show off what they can do. Yeah.
Yeah, we were immigrants. My family moved from Poland when I was 10 years old, and we had to
Okay.
defect actually because it was communist. So it was quite a journey for us.
Wow. Yeah.
And yeah, I'm close with my family and all of that. So we've a lot of ups and downs, a lot of challenging years in the teenage years, and adjusting to a new country and all of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, same thing. My parents are very let me do my own thing, and didn't really sort of get in the way or get too. I'm definitely way more overbearing with my kids than
Yeah.
my parents were, and I'm very aware of it. So I'm trying to
Yeah.
just let them do it. And
Yeah.
I find I am hard too on them. But part of me, though, I think that our parents just didn't know what they didn't know. You know what I mean? Like,
That's
I
fair.
think if they
Yeah.
had the awareness of how dangerous some of the things that they let us do were,
Yeah.
they wouldn't let us do it.
That's
It's
probably true.
now we have the awareness
Mhm.
because social media and all, I don't know, whatever. It's just like there's just so much info, and I think there's kind of a judgment piece that comes to it too. Like you're potentially much more visible and judged if you kind of let your kids do something
Yeah.
unsafe,
Yeah.
whereas back in the day no one really cared or
Nobody had a
judged
phone.
that, and everybody was doing the same. Everybody was letting their kids,
Yeah.
matches at, 8
Yeah.
or whatever. Like it was just like, whatever.
Yeah.
But now it's, so I think there's like a belonging aspect too. Like
Sure.
I think as humans, we all just
Yeah.
generally kind of want to maintain the status quo as much as some of us
Yeah.
more than others, obviously, but I think to some
Yeah.
degree, I mean, that sense of belonging and doing
Yeah.
things.
I also think too, back
Early.
in the old days, people didn't live near as long, right? So if you had sons, then you might have got 30 years out of those sons, you know what I mean, or 4 years. So I think the whole sort of time scale shifted back a decade. So where somebody might start doing things that a 20-year-old would do, we're now doing it 10 because they lived a lot, shorter years. And so they would have 10 kids, and hopefully 5 of those kids would survive long enough to really get that farm off the ground
Yeah.
for the next generation, right? And I think as part of that aspect is still where today we're so safe, we're so Medicare, and people are living longer than they ever have. You know what I mean? So maybe we could actually shift back a little bit, which sounds morbid to deal with overpopulation, and I think partly maybe there's a ramification from overprotection where all of a sudden we have overpopulation happening in this planet going, the natural course of
Mm,
history is no longer taking its course. We've got this human intervention that's keeping everybody alive for too
yeah.
long. Yeah.
I kind of feel Mother Nature will inevitably sort of correct us
Yeah.
if we get too out of,
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, yeah, kind of in a way, it's almost like, if you feel like, oh, it's going in this direction, where will I?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, Mother Nature will take care of it. There might be some tough times coming, but
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think COVID was a good example of how
yeah,
touch and go it can really be. It's not just with the health of people, but also with the economics. It's just the way for me, it worked out well in the sense of I didn't phase me too much. We had a 3 month lockdown here, whatever you want to call it, a shutdown, which I ended up buying a home at the peak of housing costs and all the rest during COVID. I mean, there's another thing to be thankful. I'm like, I don't know how this happened, but I'm quite grateful. But man, it was like the whole world was like, whoa, and you know what I mean? Shortages of this and overpricing of that. And it's just the whole thing just went, and it feels like it has never been the same since. Things are still
yeah,
weird,
hmm
and that's just how much we rely on society. Again, the old fashioned thing, where you grew your own vegetables and you had to raise your own beef or whatever it is you're into, and now we're so dependent on on big corporations, that us poor humans, man, if something like that goes down, we're in for a bit of
yeah,
scare.
yeah. That's true. I think about that as well. in terms of like my kids and stuff like that. But then I kind of think back to, I rewind the clock like really far back, and I think to myself, if I was a hunter gatherer, and some traveler from the future were to come and say, hey, in the future, people will live mostly indoors. They'll rarely experience, the wind.
Yeah, yeah,
They'll certainly won't understand the stars. Will have no clue about what any of the flora and fauna mean. And they won't be sitting around fires, every night telling stories, whatever, like want to commit suicide, but, and be
yeah,
super like, oh my God, that's
yeah,
just a horrible future, right? But I don't know about you, but I'm not upset about not living in the woods, or
yeah, right.
not knowing how to rub sticks to create a
Yeah,
fire. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, so
yeah,
like we've automated that away. We don't need, like, we have it. So
yeah.
I kind of think about, I think us being older, a generation, there's always that kind of relating to how we grew up, and then being concerned about, well, this is the way we knew, and so if it
Mhm.
changes, then and you don't have to know this anymore, then yes, if there's Armageddon, then what
Yeah,
will the kids, but then it's like, well, but we don't worry about not knowing how to make fire out of sticks. So,
yeah, yeah,
right, because we just,
yeah.
I think the world you're brought into is just, that becomes your norm, and you
Yeah, it's a
just
reality.
go
Yeah,
forward from there.
yeah,
So, but yeah,
yeah.
for
I think
sure
that's
being,
a great point you make too, though, because I think that's where these conversations are really good because sometimes it sparks the thought like we're not going to be necessarily teaching my kids to rub sticks together and to hunt for the sake of to survive, but still being able to get together at times and on regular occasions if we can around a fire, even making
yeah.
marshmallows, but
Mhm.
talking about things that are skills or ways of keeping a little bit of a history that we have in the future rather than because I know today our kids spend a lot of times on their phones, so they know everything about the Kardashians, they know everything about Taylor Swift and what they do, and
The
well,
important stuff.
yeah, I could really show you a dance, right? But could they start a fire? You know what I mean? So it's kind of trying to find that
Yeah,
balance of like,
yeah, yeah,
okay, you've had your
100%.
screen time, but let's have some outdoorsy time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's just a straight up anxiety that you can, like, just this base level anxiety that you can sort of diminish in your
Hmm.
life by knowing those basic things.
Sure.
Just
That's a
in the
very good
back
point.
of your mind, subconsciously knowing that, yeah, if I need to,
Yeah.
I can start a fire. I
Yeah.
can build something basic, right? Like, maybe you won't do that or do it often, but just having the experience and knowing,
Yeah.
I think there's some kind of primordial peace that comes with that,
Sure.
knowing that, yeah, if the infrastructure falls apart or even temporarily, like a COVID scenario, I mean, we didn't lose, we didn't exactly go to, kind
It
of felt
felt like
like
it
that
could have
for
though, eh?
short moments,
It,
like it might go that way,
Mhm.
but we held it together pretty well, I think,
Yeah, thank God.
relatively. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's definitely, because we're still animals, right? Like, we're
Yeah.
like, from our biological wiring, we're really just still cave people.
We are. Yeah.
And I think we live in a temperature controlled environment, and
Hmm.
literally one degree variation all the time.
Yeah.
For the more, for some that go outdoors a lot, maybe not as much, but for many,
Yeah. That's
we
a
got
wild thought, eh?
yeah, like, and so I do cold therapy a lot. Like, I take cold showers and been doing that for a while as a way to just again, just, it's very calming. I do it
Mhm.
before bed because it helps me sleep.
Well,
But there's something about mechanisms in your body that go dormant if they're not exposed to temperature changes,
right.
and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so there's all these things, like, we think we know the human body, but there's still so much we don't know about it,
Yeah. Yeah. That's
and
wild.
we're still learning, and these like Mother Nature has really constructed us incredibly. God has
Yeah.
constructed us, so is we're such an intricate machine,
It's detailed, hey? Yeah. Oh yeah.
detailed, intricate machine. My mom was a molecular biologist,
Is
and
that right?
yeah, she was actually doing RNA research. She's retired now, but she was doing RNA research right up until COVID. So, I mean, I was lucky because I had her to sort of,
Yeah.
hey, mom, what's going on here? Are these
Yeah.
vaccines, are they okay? So she was like, yeah,
Yeah.
just. It's all
See,
good.
that's an amazing thing because I love science. I love chemistry. Even in high school, my teachers were telling me, "Man, you should be a scientist. You should be a chemist, all that kind of stuff." Again, from my dad side, the detailing that I have in my mind is to be a
Mhm.
constructor, drawer, inventor, and I love and appreciate the scientists and the researcher and the engineer and the architect. Those for me, science and mathematicians and I really gravitate towards those intelligent people, right? And there's a huge sector of the population that just doesn't understand that. They don't
Yeah.
have the mind. They're more, yeah, I could rub these sticks together, make you a fire, and we'll survive from there. But they don't understand the need for science. As we evolve, so does disease and virus and all that kind of stuff
Right.
too. And to see the way people have stepped up in that field to offer protections was amazing. But then to see the big hand of the paranoid, conspiracy theorists come down and try and squash it out and make everybody else feel like
Yeah.
an idiot for being actually intelligent.
Yeah.
And it's sorry, it's a big debate for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I say do what do you, but I just think I'm so grateful for the for people like your mother, you know what I mean, that
Yeah.
are give their life work to something that actually matters for other people.
Yeah. Yeah, there was definitely I mean, a lot of people were introduced to science and without really having just basic understanding of scientific principles.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that people really don't get is just because something is printed is say, well, there was a study and it found this. Well, that's potentially completely worthless unless that study met the scientific sort of test or principles.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
was the sample size big enough? Was there a placebo?
Mhm.
Was there a control group done
Yeah.
properly? And all these types of things, right? And in many studies, they're not. And in fact, I think a lot of them are just done on purpose, just to publish something
Sure. Yeah.
as part of an agenda, right? So,
Mm.
like, science is, and my mom sort of illuminated me to this. It's to do science right and to really figure out something deep about life or the
Mhm.
universe takes a tremendous amount of time. And what is time? Money, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it takes a ton of money to do science right.
Hmm.
And so that's why you have a lot of poor science because it's
Yeah.
just not done right, not properly. So, but yet people don't understand. Like, if you read something, like I try to tell my kids this, and of course they don't want to listen to me because teenagers now and like, yeah, whatever. But like, when you read something, you always have to look at it as uh it may be the truth, or it may be, I don't even like the word truth. It may be, it may have a high probability of being accurate,
Yeah. Yeah.
or it may not.
Yeah.
And if that piece of information matters to you, then you have to take the time to determine
Yeah.
how probable it is that piece of information to be accurate. And to
And see
do
that
that, you look
through,
at the
right?
source. You
Yeah.
you look at, is this information consistent in other areas, so there's all sorts of things you can do, right? But just like having that mind scientific,
Yeah.
and it's not to say you look at everything, because some people say, oh, they either take one camp or the other. They look at information and go, well, if it's on the internet, it's false. Well, no, not necessarily. There's a
Right.
lot of very accurate things on the internet.
Absolutely.
But yes, there's a lot of false things on the internet. So it's just to realize, and also when people tell you things, right? Well, my friend said this and that. And like,
Mhm.
okay, well, I didn't want my kids to think that everything that they're told or their friends, they probably don't know. No, none of them probably know what they're talking about, because they
Exactly.
may very well know what they're talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
But you have to remember that until you've taken the time to look into it,
That's right.
you have to always have that
Skepticism a little bit or whatever. Yeah.
skepticism to know, well, and sometimes a lot of times you just don't care, right? You're not going to go
Yeah.
and research and deep dive into everything. You just don't
Yeah.
have time for that. So
Yeah.
if it's not really that impactful to your life, or you don't really think, okay, sounds good, and just go
Yeah.
with that and be good
Wasn't
with
that
it.
a funny dynamic though in our society today, though, where things that are actually impacting our society very negatively are some of the things that are most unresearched things by the average person to date ever. So, for example, this whole false news thing and all these misinformation put out there, people go, "Oh, whatever. That's your opinion. That's mine." It's like, my wife even gives me heck sometimes. She's like, "Why do you entertain these comments and stuff like that?" I said, "Babe, because if somebody doesn't, this snapperhead's going to influence a whole bunch of other snapperheads that think the same way, which is going to continue to grow that snowball into this big false reality of where the person who instigated that thing gets his way or her way, for whatever the case may be. I said it's important that if you do see a falsehood out there, that sometimes you do step in if it's impactful, if it can really affect society, right? For example, the misinformation about just in politics. I mean, I don't want to get into politics at all, but I mean, sometimes you can see the outcome of what that is being trying to be done as very negative for people. Do you know what I mean? And so if we don't sort of step up and say, that's actually false. That's not true at all. I know there was one thing with Joe Rogan in his podcast. He had this thing about negative impacts of the COVID vaccine, but the site where that was counting these reports of negative results from the vaccine was just anybody who had any kind of complaint at all, like, oh, my brother got the vaccine, he turned into the Hulk, and this guy had 4 eyeballs, but they, even though they were being ridiculous, they were still counted. So he was drawing his numbers from that site or whatever. And so he's saying, oh yeah, 30% we're getting, ill effects. It's like, well, actually not really, because of that thing you described, 29% were 4 eyeballs, 9 legs, turning to the Hulk and so forth. So I agree. Being accurate and having a loose lip to put false information out there is on us all to be honest. And that's what you said about truth and honesty. I think that's a key, is that if it's not true and if it's not right and if it's not a good thing, you know what I mean, then rather just keep your mouth shut, you know what I mean, than feed this machine that's really doing us all a lot of harm. Because you're seeing like nurses being spit on and doctors being shunned and politicians being rocks thrown at them. I mean, there's some politicians I don't like, but it's not my place to throw rocks at them.
No,
it's my place to vote.
I mean, I always try to remember that these people work a lot of hours and to do this, you know what I mean? Whereas, I might not like their decisions or even like them as a person.
Yeah.
But to go out there and spit on them and get like, but go in, like my wife actually reminds me of this sometimes when I complain, I don't know, some member of the public, maybe politician or something, she's like, well, you could go run for council. You could do. I'm like, yeah, okay, fair enough. You're right.
That's
like,
fair enough.
But that's it, right? Like if you're annoyed with something, go do something about it,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
Or don't complain.
Mm-hmm.
We all want, it's nice to vent here and there, but
sure.
I think earlier on in my life, I was big on this idea that venting is healthy. That's what I would call complaining, is venting. Well, I'm just venting.
Yeah, it sounds better.
And then I met my wife and she doesn't do that. And then so we would live in this kind of dichotomy of, I would do that, she would never do that. And I kind of almost would look at, well, you should just vent sometimes. It's healthy, right? But then she kind of made me realize that, well, what you're actually doing is this whole X begets X. Like the more you vent, quote unquote, it's just negative ranting, the more your brain just wants to do more of that. And then you're just like a miserable person. It's addictive, right? And so I realized, oh shit, like I think venting is like drinking alcohol or whatever. Like having a drink once in a while, no problem. But man, if you got to have a drink every day or to wake up, or you need 5 drinks a day, like same thing with venting, right? Like if you have an event 5 times a day or every time you meet people, like no good.
No, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Okay, so I've got some rapid fire questions to throw at you, and I like being self-employed because
it makes me free. I make all my decisions for myself. I'm accountable to myself, and how much I make or don't make is completely dependent on how much I work or don't work. So, and I love my free time, so I'll work my ass off to have the time to be free. So,
toughest part of being self-employed is
being self-motivated and driven, and not being distracted by too many other things, so that you can stay focused to make enough money in what you're doing. So that's a very tough thing to do, is to stay focused and know that if you're not driven, you're going to go hungry. So is to stay motivated, stay driven, stay in a place where you're constantly finding the work, but also finding the balance of not taking on too much work that you can't see the end of the tunnel. You know what I mean? Taking off enough that I got to buy smaller chunks so that I can get through it, rather than this huge, massive chunk that I tend to take on.
Yeah,
It's
driven, the constant kind of everyday balancing act, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you ever been in times where you struggled with being motivated and driven?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm by nature very lazy. I mean,
Okay.
I could watch TV movies till 4 in the morning and get up, when it's on out of bed at 10 a.m. and have some raisin toast and draw a little picture and kind of fart around and get nothing done and be completely happy about it. But I know that animal cat has to be kept in the cage, man, because if he's let out, he's going to be taken over. But so it's very difficult for me to stay motivated and driven. So it's a daily choice. I get up and I go, okay, if I just put that foot in front and then the next foot in front, if I told you right now everything that I have on my plate right now, you'd be like, that's insanity. But I get through it all just because I'm putting one foot in front of the other and staying motivated and seeing the prize at the end of the job. You know what I mean? So for example, real quick, was just in the studio, gonna release the single. I'm building a music studio right now. We're in the control room, which is a real mess, but I've got a live room that's just behind us there as well. The tattoo shop, the drawing till 2 in the morning, raising 2 apprentices, building a suite for my mom, an in-law suite.
Wow.
And then also, taking my granddaughter to preschool and all of that. There's a lot going on, but it's just, okay, that next task, that next task, that next task. And it just becomes a rhythm. You just stay in rhythm, stay in step with it.
Right. A
Yeah.
rhythm. What does work-life balance mean to you?
Oh man. See that I'm not really good at that. I think work-life balance is man, for me is to have I got to be better at this. So I'm not saying that I am good at this, but I'm thinking the time that I do have outside of work in my life with my wife or my kids or my grandkids is to make those as quality as possible, because there's not a lot of it. And the balance is being attentive and professional and conscientious for my clients or whatever I'm doing in business is super important. Being, that guy, but then also being tender and quality for the people that I love the most is more important than the other thing. And if I want to survive in the business world, I got to have that integrity. But the same integrity towards my family has to be, if I want to be a good family man, I need to have the integrity of loving fully and being fully attentive when they're speaking. And to be honest, I suck at sometimes, you know what I mean? Because it's like, I'm not listening because there's so many work things going on. So I need to just go, the balance is when work's off, shut it off. No more about work. Let's talk about dance or whatever the kids are into, or, you know what I mean? The little Jeep that needs charging so my grandson can ride around my yard, stuff like that. So yeah. Quality and integrity.
Yeah. Oh, that's the focus is big. Favorite mental health hack,
Mental health hack.
if you have one.
That's a good one. Mental health hack is really just to be think about the things that are you were talking about the valleys, peaks and valleys. Sometimes the mental health, when you're in a valley, look up. You know what I mean? If you're looking at your feet, you're always going to be deeper because there's always going to be cracks and things, but if you just look up, you'll see the mountains. I lived in Banff, Canada for a while, Banff, Alberta. And if you're looking at the ground, you're missing all the beauty around you. As soon as you look up, like, whoa, and now you want to climb the mountain because you see Mount Rundle. Like, that thing's beautiful. I really want to be at the peak of that thing. And it starts to make you, I think nobody ever wanted to climb a mountain they couldn't see from a distance. You know what I mean? From the valley. Like, you only want to climb a mountain that you can actually see how grand that is. If you're halfway up the mountain, your face is to the mountain, you're never going to want to climb that mountain you're on. You just think, man, this thing's kind of steep. But when you get down the valley and you look up, man, like, ooh, that's a challenge. I want to take that challenge on. So yeah, that's it right there. Yeah. That's my mental health hack, is to just look up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great tip. Apart from using Booked-in, the best scheduling software in the world, 100%. Of course, what is your best scheduling tip?
Oh, marry a great woman. Because I suck at that administrative stuff, boy. No, she's amazing at it.
So delegate, basically.
So the best scheduling tip would be just set a good reminder. You know what I mean? Obviously, and I got to apologize again. For some reason, I swore, because the night before we were supposed to have this podcast before, I literally went to my phone and went, okay, making sure it's there. And I did, but then it never let me know. You know what I mean? Which is weird. And that was my stock app. I should have just used the Booked-in one to just schedule the Booked-in thing, right? Yeah. Which is ironic. That's not what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
But honestly, yeah, no, Booked a great app for, I mean, it reminds me of stuff and reminds my clients. My clients come in every time. They're like, "Oh, that's a really good app you got there. Sends reminders and notes on how to take care of my skin before." We've got it all dialed, right? So,
Oh,
but
nice.
a good wife too is helpful, or a good administrator, whether you're a woman or a man,
Yeah.
one is that can help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's that. Yeah, that's great advice. All right, Joel, thank you so much for, again, this is a fantastic conversation. I really
Yeah, it's my
enjoyed meeting
pleasure.
you and chatting with you. Yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah, and anytime, Mike, you know what I mean? And like I said, that right that you did before on the social medias there, I really appreciated that. It was really well thought. And it was funny because people will write stuff or give you a review or something at times, and it's very surface. You really touched on a lot of cool things there. So you're a man
Oh, good.
of many talents as well, that's for sure. I'd love to do this
Yeah,
again with you. You know what I mean? Maybe in a future, I'll keep up to date on what happens with the single, whatever, and we can talk again if you love. Yeah.
I would love to do that for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do this again sometime.
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely. All right, man.
Okay.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much,
Joel.
Jay. Yeah,
Okay.
cheers.
Take
Bye.
care. Okay, bye.
And that's a wrap. I hope our discussions today have given you some insights, inspiration, or even just food for thought. Whether it's navigating the world of business, championing mental health, adapting to remote work, or keeping up with the latest tech trends, remember, every challenge is a gift, an opportunity to learn more about yourself, others, and the world around us. I want to extend a big thank you to all our listeners for tuning in. Your support truly means the world. If you found value in today's conversation, please consider sharing this podcast with a friend or leaving us a review. It helps more people discover these stories and insights. I'm Mike Ivashu, signing off for now. Stay curious, stay resilient, and I'll catch you in the next episode.